I'm Mary Harville, President and CEO of the Kentucky Lottery Corporation. We are so proud to partner with Simmons College of Kentucky for this virtual lecture series celebrating Black History Month. We appreciate the opportunity to help bring this lecture series to you. We know Kentucky's most deserving students are counting on us, and our mission of fueling imagination and funding education is more important now than ever. Thank you.
Welcome back to Rise, a 4-part Black History Month educational series presented by Simmons College of Kentucky and the Kentucky Lottery Commission. This evening, learn about the stories of these educators, activists, philanthropists, and world changers in Women of Wonder.
Without the strength of Black women throughout the span of 3 centuries, Simmons never could have survived. Sometimes I am asked, why is Simmons so close to St. Stephen Baptist Church? Well, one reason why there is an affiliation with St. Stephen Baptist Church is because the president of Simmons and the pastor of St. Stephen are the same 2 persons. But in the history of Simmons College, that is not unique, that is not novel. Most of the presidents of Simmons College historically have always been pastors. In fact, Dr. Charles Parrish Sr. himself was the pastor of Calvary Baptist Church. So pastors have always served as the president of our college. Most persons, many in the white community, they do not understand our St. Stephen Baptist Church is a part of an association of Baptist churches throughout the state of Kentucky called the General Association of Kentucky Baptists, founded in 1865 for the sole purpose of establishing a school. What makes our Simmons so unique was the prominent role that it gave to Black women, the empowering of Black women. Some of the most important Black women in American history have some connection, some affiliation with Simmons College of Kentucky. The great Mary V. Cook, who was the wife of Dr. Charles Parrish Sr. Nanny Helen Barrows, who was on our campus, whose only degree came from Simmons College of Kentucky.
Nanny Helen Burroughs was born in 1879 in Orange, Virginia. And because of the death of certain family members, I think she will move with her mother to Washington, D.C. She was an educator, an orator, a religious leader, a civil rights leader, and a feminist. After she graduated from high school, it's interesting. One scholar says that she first applied to become a domestic science teacher. And the feeling was that she did not get the position because of 2 things. 1, she was too dark, and 2, the social class that she came from.
When I think about her, what I think about is a woman who would not quit, who did not allow anything to stop her. There's 2 ways that we are discriminated against. 1, white race discriminate against the Black race. But what we seldom talk about is how we Blacks discriminate against each other. And she did not get this job because it was felt that she was perhaps too dark for the job. You know, there's the light skin and the dark skin Negro. And so she was darker skinned, so she didn't get the job. But that did not stop her.
That will motivate her to eventually establish, to become focused upon education. And in the latter part of her career, she will establish a training school for Black women and girls.
This is what this woman did. She went to the women and they built this school that everybody was against. It was the school for women, colored women and girls. It was designed to help them to go to school because schooling was something that women were not supposed to have. Education wasn't a big thing. You were supposed to stay at home, raise the babies, cook, and wash clothes. But she felt there was more to women than just, as we saying for our theme for March, more than hips, lips, and fingertips.
As I was doing my research, she's been recognized for one of her speeches.
That was in 1900. How the sisters are hindered from helping. And she made that speech on the floor of the National Baptist Convention at the age of 21. Well, think about this 21-year-old girl at that time when women really didn't hardly have a voice, that she stood and she spoke at the National Baptist Convention and talked about how you are hindering women from talking, from working, from doing, from being a part of.
She was definitely a courageous person, because I would think just based upon the title, to stand up in 1900 in front of a group of Black Baptist ministers and preachers, and to say that the sisters were being hindered, took a lot of courage. And seemingly she dedicated her life to the education of Black women.
If you are a part of the Black church tradition, you know what Women's Day is. Well, the whole idea for Women's Day was the brainchild of Nannie Helen Burroughs. And she conceived of the idea right on the campus of Simmons College of Kentucky, the place where she received a degree, the place where she served and worked with then President Charles Parrish Sr. One of the great leaders of the Black church movement among Baptists was Dr. William J Simmons, who was the founder of the National Baptist Convention in 1887. Perhaps one of the reasons that Dr. Simmons will live on throughout history was because of his empowerment of Black women at the close of the 19th century. Dr. Simmons helped organize the first Black Baptist women's organization in the history of America, called the Baptist Women's Educational Convention.
Many of the members of the BWEC are educators or retired educators. We have some current, some of our members now are still teachers, administrators. Even the sorority that I belong to, education is a big component of that. So I think we all have that love of education and knowing that we are lifelong learners. And so that is a core that binds us as members of the BWEC. Our love for education, just as they knew education was the key that unlocks many doors back then. Throughout the years, we know that is still true of education.
Dr. Evelyn Higginbotham, who is a brilliant professor at Harvard University. In fact, she was the dean of the department. She wrote a phenomenal book entitled Righteous Discontent. And that phrase, righteous discontent, was a phrase that she borrowed from Nannie Helen Burroughs, who also was affiliated and associated with Simmons College of Kentucky, because she had her headquarters for many years at Simmons when the National Baptist Convention of America had its its headquarters in Louisville, Kentucky. Well, this is what Dr. Evelyn Higginbotham of Harvard says in her book, Righteous Discontent, about the Baptist Women's Educational Convention. She says, the first statewide convention of Black Baptist women was organized in Kentucky in 1883, specifically around the issue of Black higher education, calling themselves the Baptist Women's Educational Convention of the state of Kentucky. Black Baptist women marshaled their members from churches throughout the state in order to generate funds for the State University at Louisville, renamed Simmons University in 1918. Despite its name, the university was not a public institution, but rather a private school owned and controlled by the Black Baptists of Kentucky. As early as August 1865, Black ministers led their churches into statewide associations, and the establishment of a school among their most immediate priorities. One reason for the dynamic growth of the school during the 1880s was the school's president, the Reverend William J Simmons, a Howard University graduate, pastor of the First Baptist Church in Lexington. Simmons was appointed to the presidency of the Louisville School in August of 1880. In 1882, the school added a college department to its secondary school curriculum. 2 years later, officially changed its name from the Normal and Theological Institute to State University at Louisville.
Knowing the time, 1883, not long after the end of the Civil War, for one thing, and then the General Association of Baptists in Kentucky, as we know it now, was formed first. And that in itself was a big event, because that was their purpose, was to start a school, which we know now is Simmons College of Kentucky.
Simmons developed its curriculum along the classical liberal arts model prevalent at Howard University and the schools of the American Baptist Home Mission Society. The second reason the school improved growth was for the formation of a separate women's convention in 1883.
And so even then they saw the need, which was a bold move on their part, because women, their place in society, in the church, in politics was basically non-existent. So that was a bold move on their part to organize this women's auxiliary, the Baptist Women's Educational Convention. And our charge was to provide support for Simmons College of Kentucky. So that was our mission as the BWEC, as a fundraising arm for the school as well as mission work. So we got busy in our own way in raising funds with the women across the state to take care of that indebtedness.
At that time, the ministerial-led convention, the General Association of Kentucky, had failed to raise sufficient funds to meet the school's growing debts. When the convention refused to admit women into its meetings for discussion of the university's support, the women formed a separate organization. Women's societies already existed in many individual churches, and they were eager to create a statewide network. Simmons gave the women his support, providing his church for their initial meeting. Simmons recognized the potential power of organized women.
We are still having our same mission of support of Simmons. We're 138 years old, the oldest African American women's convention in America, which I am proud of. I will have to say that I am a member of the oldest Greek letter organization, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So those two mixed, and several ladies on our executive board are also members of Alpha Kappa Alpha. And one of our big initiatives has to do with support of HBCUs. So I feel like I have a dual role. These two mesh together well.
So once the Baptist Women's Educational Convention was organized, the first Black Baptist women's organization in the world, raising money for Simmons. First of all, helping Simmons, at that time State University, to pay off its debt. But its most monumental and lasting contribution is that they built the women's dormitory and Domestic Science building on the campus of Simmons College of Kentucky. That building that was built by women and dedicated in 1908 still stands today with their name on the cornerstone.
Ida B. Wells was not trying to make history. She was trying to make change. She wanted change, a God-centered change maker. She put her life at risk. I mean, I wrote some things and some people threatened me, but I'm not sure that I was at risk because Ida B. Wells took that fight for me. When you talk about courage, to come in that era, in the 1800s, talking that smack that Ida B. Wells was talking. I like that about her. When I tell you, she set the tone for Black journalists. Most of the time, what you learn in journalism schools is separate your journalism and your activism. You're supposed to be this neutral party, which is a lie. You can't not feel what you feel. And so she was making those points years ago, the things that we're talking about now. See, before there was a Black Lives Matter movement, a generation ago in the 1800s, Ida B. Wells was saying Black Lives Matter. So what we get from her is how to use journalism to make change. Journalism to raise people's consciousness. That when you have the ability to communicate, you have power.
Ida B. Wells was a journalist, an educator, and an early leader in the civil rights movement. She was born in slavery in Mississippi, and eventually her family will move to Memphis. She wrote for the Memphis Free Speech, and she started off as seemingly a writer, and eventually part owner, and eventually she will own the newspaper.
Ida B. Wells, Shirley Chisholm, Fannie Lou Hamer, Joyce and Dory Ladner. There's a list of women, Bernice Reagan, Sweet Honey in the Rock, a cappella, the SNCC Freedom Singers. All of these people, Cecily Tyson, blazing trails, going places, wearing natural hair on TV 50 years ago. You know what I'm saying? So all of them blazed the trail, and I'm not sure that they always were conscious that that's what they were doing.
For Ida B. Wells, heart and head went together. We knew where her heart was, but she also used her head, which would be involved in research, to support what she happened to believe.
So when you think about yourself in 2021, talking about how brave you are, think about 1859, 1890, 2 minutes out of slavery.
Bravery, courage. You have to, when you want an example of that, in 1900.
We got to understand her in her time. She was a Black woman with a big mouth, and she apparently debated people. And I think that makes life interesting. I think that's how people looking on learn.
And she came out of the Black community, and she studied the Black community, and she defended the Black community. We know that she attended 2 colleges. One would be Lemoyne-Owen, which is located in Memphis. And she also attended Fisk in Nashville, Tennessee, which has a very distinguished history as a historically Black college and university.
And I think Ida B. Wells was an inspiration, because I think we make a mistake when we limit her to being a journalist. She was many things, and journalist was one of them.
She was a writer then, a speaker, and an organizer, not just for civil rights, but also for the women's movement. She wrote for different newspapers, and one of them being the American Baptist, that of course is of the General Association of Baptists in Kentucky.
You know, in Dr. Henry Louis Gates' documentary on the Black church, he mentioned Ida B. Wells, Crusader for Justice. But what the documentary failed to include was the prominent role that William J. Simmons played in the life of Ida B. Wells. This is what she says about Dr. Simmons in her autobiography. He was the head of their work among the colored people and was also the president of the State University of Louisville, Kentucky, which of course would later become Simmons in 1918, and president of the National Baptist Convention. He was truly a big man, figuratively and physically. He wanted me as a correspondent of his paper and offered me the lavish sum of $1 a letter weekly. It was the first time anyone had offered to pay me for the work I had enjoyed doing. I had never dreamed of receiving any pay, for I had been too happy over the thought that the papers were giving me space. For the next 3 years, I was on the staff of the American Baptist, which is still in publication today and is the oldest ongoing Black newspaper in America. It's right here in Louisville, Kentucky. In every way he could, Dr. Simmons encouraged me to be a newspaper woman. And whatever fame I achieved in that line, I owe in large measure to his influence and encouragement. That's what the great Ida B. Wells said about William J. Simmons.
You know, I love being a Black woman. I love it simply because I know my history. I know the women on whose shoulders I stand. And so as we think about Ida B. Wells and our other heroes, we got to understand that none of them just did it on their own. So whenever I hear somebody tell me that nobody helped them, they did it by themselves, I say run from that person. We all stand on the shoulders of somebody else. I stand on the shoulders of Ida B. Wells. But let me say this, there are somebody standing on my shoulders. And I'm looking for the sisters that are coming forward now and let new leadership emerge. So for me, Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer, there's so many sisters, contemporary sisters. I look at them and I see Stacey Abrams, Latasha Brown. You know, I see these sisters as continuing what those women started and the role they play today. When I look at Stacey Abrams and all of them, and all I do is look at them and smile and say, look at Ida. That's Ida's babies.
I am so proud of Simmons College's rich history. And it is critical that all of us know this history that has been lost, because history does 3 things for us. History is important, first of all, because we need to learn the lessons of the past. The reason our country is so divided today on the issue of race, why you saw the siege on our Capitol, January the 6th, was because many people do not understand the history of race in this country. They think the reason why there are Black communities and white communities is somehow that just happened. No, this was socially engineered. And only when we study history do we truly understand how we got to be where we presently are today. So we study history to learn the lessons of the past. Those who fail to learn the lessons of the past are doomed to repeat them. And we keep repeating the same mistakes because we have not truly learned in an unedited way where our nation has come from in the past. We learn the lessons of the past. That's why history is important. History also is important because of the inspiration that history gives us. When we study history, we look at people and study people who faced tremendous challenges, who had tremendous odds against them. But because of courage and faith and determination, they were able to overcome those odds. In the midst of racial oppression, they were able to build institutions and overcome insurmountable obstacles. And we get inspired when we learn what they did and say, you know what? If they could do it, so can I. But then the final reason we study history is because we need to replicate its accomplishments. The same institutions that they built that created the Black middle class in the state of Kentucky is still in need. We need to continue to build these institutions and sustain these institutions, because if they were viable a century ago, these same institutions have the power and the potential to raise a new generation of outstanding, educated persons who can take our city, state, and nation to new levels of excellence.
We develop leaders.
You represent who I am, who I have been, and who I can be.
Change agents.
Keeping the spirit of activism and engagement alive and well.
That ignite their communities.
The community of achievement, one that will demand much of you.
And change the world.
He set out to do it, and to do it well.
We produce 80% of all Black doctors and dentists. We generate the Black middle class.
Strong enough to support the weight of whatever you could dream.
We provide a sense of belonging, a celebration of our unique culture.
That is the magic of this place. Almost anything can happen here.
We are the pipeline that produced many of America's Black first.
But its mission has been to ensure those firsts were not the last.
The nation's VP-elect is a product of this distinct heritage.
When you attend an HBCU, there is nothing you can't do.
We are America's historically Black colleges and universities.
Hey! Hey, hey, hey!
And we're proud to be Louisville's only HBCU, Simmons College of Kentucky.
Maybe you have been chosen for such a time as this.
Visit simmonscollegeky.edu or text ADMIT to 55444. We are Louisville's HBCU.